We're back for the 6th time to start a budget build. This time we've got the VS4-10 Fordyce here. And this will be the first time ever doing a budget build with one of the Vanquish RTRs. So this one feels like the perfect candidate for that. If you're not familiar with the budget builds that I've done in the past, it's always been $50 per week and just upgrades every single week. If you didn't spend the budget, it carried over. Budget doesn't have to mean cheap. It just means on a certain amount of money. That was the whole purpose of the budget builds in the past. But this time, like the previous last few times, Matt from the Scale Builders Guild is joining me, and we are going to change things up a little bit compared to how we've done these in the past. We are going to be spinning a wheel to determine our weekly budget. And we're doing that live on the Wednesday live stream takeover show. So each week we'll spin to determine what our budget's going to be. And we've got a bunch of different options that it could be. On that wheel, there's a bunch of possibilities. Some of them don't necessarily say exactly what the budget is going to be. And in that case, rather than doing just $50 a week, we're going to up it to 60. The first time that I did the budget build series and set the budget of $50 a week was, I believe, over 10 years ago. So we're gonna up the weekly budget just a little bit to make things just a little bit more entertaining. But the wheel could override that budget. And the items that are on the wheel are Amazon week, where we have to spend our budget with parts from Amazon. Then we have a weekly total of just $25, 50, 75, or up to 100. So it could decrease or increase our budget compared to the normal amount. Then we've got no 3D printing week. There'll be many weeks where Matt and I decide to throw something 3D printed onto the truck. To keep things more interesting for those of you that may not have a 3D printer, then make sure we focus on it for that week. We have wife price, where anything that you buy that week is 50% off. Then we have the temperature at the Fordyce Trail. The name Fordyce comes from the Fordyce Trail here in Northern California. So if we spin the wheel and land on that, at that time, we'll check what the temperature is at the Fordyce Trail in Fahrenheit, and that is our budget. We have freebie, where you get one free part. One part number, you get that for free for the week. Then there's I declare bankruptcy, where you get no money for the week, and any money that you had saved up in the bank is gone as well. We have recycle bin, where you have to recycle at least 3 parts in your collection to add to the truck for that week. Next, we have foreign part, which means we have to use a part on the vehicle from a company we've never used before. Next, we have SBG/HD choice, where we get to decide for the other person what they have to focus on for that week. And lastly, we have Hot Wheels, where you have to spend $10 out of your budget to buy Hot Wheels. For the first episode of this, we spun on last week's live show, and I'll cut to that now. All right, here we go. Yeah. Ready for the spin. Hit the like button first. Yes. All right, here we go.
Yeah, actually hit the like button if you haven't already, please.
Spin the wheel, hit the button. There we go. I got...
What's it?
Oh my God, it was so close. I get a weekly total of $50. So I got a $10 deduction right off the whack. Yeah. But it was so close to I declare bankruptcy. As you can see in that video, my total resulted in a $50 total for the week. So right back down to where we initially were with the budget build. How fitting that is. Being that this truck is bone stock out of the box, one of the things that I like doing to this truck the most is adding a little bit of weight to the front. Now, these are the Vanquish 0.8-inch wide brass rings. The new wheels that come on the Fordyce are of a new design. These are a beadlock that use an inner clamp ring just like the aluminum Vanquish Products wheels. So these will replace the molded plastic rings on the inside of these wheels and give us a little bit of weight up front. That's going to be an easy modification that we're going to walk through, and I'll show you exactly how that works. But being that there is a bankruptcy tile on the wheel, I want to try and continue to use as much of my budget as I can each week, not leaving too much on the table to possibly get wiped out. So I'm going to try and make sure that I grab some little extras here and there to install, just to hope and, make sure that I'm getting the most for my money. And this week, that means that I'm going to take and install these simple aluminum posts on the transmission. The VFD transmission in this truck factory comes with molded posts that go between the main portion of the transmission and the front motor mount. And I just want to take one piece of the puzzle at a time and get those replaced. Another easy mod that we'll also walk through the details of. Before we get into the installation of those, each week I do want to take some time and add a little bit of visual interest to the truck. I'm very performance oriented and I'll continue to move forward on the performance stuff, but I need to make sure that I'm taking some time to try and make this thing my own. So for this week, what I want to do is try and give the appearance of a scale engine. And I've got a model for an LS engine lower portion that covers the front of the VFD here underneath of the truck. That's a file that I sell on my website. It's inexpensive, but it gives just a nice visual look from the side of the truck. I've got some engine bay covers as well, and maybe that's something that we'll work on as we go. But for the one that you can see the most while it's moving, I'd like to get that done. So we're going to take the time and get that 3D printed and installed this week also. If there's other visual changes you guys would like to see done to this as we go, absolutely drop that in the comments below. I am going to be keeping the body. We're keeping the look of the Fordyce for this. This is one of my favorite trucks. I really like the look of the old school Willys type truck. Now let's get into the installation of this week's upgrades. So the first thing that we have to do is dismount the wheel from the axle. This is a standard 7mm nut driver that is needed for this because this is the straight axle version of the F10s. Once you have that tire off, the new KMC Riot beadlocks are held together with 8 screws on the back side. And those use a standard 2mm driver. These dismount really easily. So just remove all 8 screws right away, and that'll allow you to separate the pieces of the wheel. The easiest method is to press the front face out of the tire, and then you can pull the rear face off. Lastly, you've got the inner clamp ring that will be inside of the tire beads. What we'll be doing is replacing that inner molded clamp ring with this new brass one. As you can see here, the brass is going to be substantially heavier than those molded inner clamp rings. Once you replace the brass clamp ring, you just reassemble the wheels just like you took them off. You will likely want to reassemble the wheels by tightening the 8 3mm screws in a star pattern, just going slowly together. Don't tighten all the way at first, as it may cause a bead to pop out of place. But these tires will reseat in those wheels fairly simply. To install these aluminum posts in the VFD transmission, a fairly straightforward process as well. We do need to clip the zip ties holding all the wires in place underneath of that body so that you can disconnect the bullet plugs from the motor. From there, there's going to be 5 screws to remove from the top side of the transmission, 2 towards the front near the motor plate and 3 towards the transfer case area. Lastly, you'll have 1 on the bottom side of the skid plate that ties into that motor plate. Once those are all free, you can just lift the transmission right out of place. Your drive shafts will come with it and the slider pieces will likely fall. Once the transmission is out, you can pull the spur gear cover off. And then we're going to be removing the spur gear itself with a 7mm nut driver again. Remove the spur gear. Next, you'll need to pull out the 2mm pin and the spacer that sits behind it. Next, you can remove the 2 M3 screws that go through the motor plate into those plastic standoffs. The plastic standoffs do have cross holes, so if you can't hold them steady to remove the screw, you can put something through that cross hole to stop it from spinning. I can usually just squeeze the transmission a little bit with those posts and keep them from going anywhere. Now we're going to use the aluminum posts to go in place here, and we're basically just going to be reversing this process. Now, since these do not have a cross hole, if you have any hard time trying to get everything to go together at once, you can put a wrench on each end of them to stop them from spinning. But usually, again, I can just kind of squeeze them enough and you can get those 3mm screws to go in place. Now, once we've got the transmission reassembled, we are not going to be using this spur gear cover. So we're going to set that aside. I commonly do not run a spur gear cover, so it's never been a big deal for me. If you're absolutely opposed to that idea, then you can skip this part, of course. Now, I've already 3D printed the parts here to make up the lower look of an LS engine, and it's done in 2 colors. The block portion is done in an orange, and then I did the pulley and the oil pan in a silver. The oil pan and block portion just glue together with whatever glue you use most commonly, and then you'll need to just put a small, either an M2 or a 164 screw through the pulley into the block to finish off that look. Now, this engine model is held in place by the screw that goes through the skid plate into the motor plate. Normally, the spur gear cover was in that area. Now, this is going to occupy that area. The rest of the transmission will just go right back in place. As you're hooking up the drive shafts, make sure that you line up the small line that's on the drive shaft on each end. That will keep everything spinning in phase. It's a small notch that you'll notice on the upper portion of the drive shaft. With all of that installed, now you can see the detail of that engine underneath there, just giving you a little bit more visual interest. I liked the orange for the block to give a little bit of contrast to the blue color of the body. One last little simple mod before we get this all buttoned up is we're going to push that front bumper in 1 more notch. This will cause us to not be able to hinge the body up quite as far, but for me, that's not a big deal. We're just going to remove the 2 set pins on the bottom side of the bumper mount, slide that bumper in 1 more notch, and then replace those pins. And that's what we got accomplished for week 1. I really like the detail of the LS engine. I've used this on a number of models in the past, and it just adds something. You can see it from so many angles. Of course, you can add, engine models under the hood, but you don't see those most of the time, only when the body's off. So getting something that you can see from underneath and from the sides just adds a little bit extra. Specifically, having the pulley up front in place, everything's about right. And I'll link to everything that we added today in the description below. Again, if you guys have suggestions of things we can do to change up the look of the Fordyce here, drop those in the comments below. Don't forget to go check out Matt's video and see what he did specifically with the lucky spin he got for week 1. And if you're interested in seeing the spins, make sure and check out the live stream every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. As always, hope you guys enjoy the budget build. It's fun to be back for it. We're going to have 7 more episodes to follow. If you did enjoy it, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, and hit the notification bell so you see the videos as soon as they get uploaded. We'll be back next Wednesday for week 2 of the budget build. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next one.